Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jordan Rutter, Director of Public Relations at American Bird Conservancy. Our Giving Tuesday event continues in celebration of birds, habitat, and ABC's work across the Western Hemisphere. Today, we especially give thanks to everyone that supports us working to save places for birds every day. If you haven't already done so, please go to saveaplaceforbirds.org and make your most generous gift for birds before midnight. I now have the honor and privilege of talking about birds with two very special guests, Jane Alexander, an accomplished actress, and Mike Parr, ABC president. Jane Alexander is an actress, a writer, and a conservationist. She chaired the National Endowment for the Arts under President Clinton from 1993 to 1997. Her chronicle of those turbulent years, Command Performance, An Actress in the Theater of Politics, was a New York Times notable book in 2000. Jane, a Tony Award winner, was most recently seen on Broadway in Grand Horizons. She has performed in over 100 plays and was inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame in 1994. Her long film career includes 4 Academy Award nominations and 2 Emmys for her TV work. A dedicated conservationist and birder, Jane has been a board member of various conservation organizations, including ABC. She currently sits on the board of the National Audubon Society and chairs the Conservation Council of Panthera. In 2012, the Indianapolis Prize inaugurated the Jane Alexander Global Wildlife Ambassador Award, and Jane was its first recipient. She has been honored for her conservation work by the Safina Center and the Ripley Waterfowl Conservancy. Her book, Wild Things, Wild Places, is about her travels with field biologists and conservation stories in many countries. Mike Parr is ABC's president. He joined ABC in 1996 and has co-authored several books, including Parrots, A Guide to Parrots of the World, Important Bird Areas in the United States, and the American Bird Conservancy Guide to Bird Conservation, along with numerous articles and papers. He is chair of the Alliance for Zero Extinction and a member of the board of directors of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. I know we all can't wait to hear what Jane and Mike have to share, so without further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Welcome, Jane and Mike. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.
We'll start with a pretty universal bird experience for our first question, your spark bird. So Jane, do you want to start by sharing what species holds a special place in your heart and how you got into birding?
Yes, my spark bird is the wood thrush. My husband and I, my late husband, Ed Sharon, and I moved to the country outside of New York City, Putnam County, New York, in the early 70s, over 50 years ago. And in the woods, for the whole 34 years we lived there, was a family of wood thrush right in the back. And this one I called the Grand Old Man would give us a concert in the first 7 years, I think he was with us. And he would give us a concert on summer evenings and first thing in the morning. And I thought it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life, coming out of the forest, sometimes in the mist of the early morning. And so he became my spark bird, the Grand Old Man wood thrush in Putnam County, New York. And then I joined an Audubon chapter locally there and got hooked on birds. Luckily, I had a mentor, an older man named Tom Morgan, who took me out. And life began.
That's wonderful. I know that Iole song is definitely iconic. So wonderful. Mike, do you want to chime in?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in England, and so we have a different set of birds there. But really, my main spark bird, I think, that got me interested was great spotted woodpecker. And woodpeckers are a little bit less common in Britain than they are here. I mean, we've got the Downies and the Harrys here. Over there, the equivalent of the Harry in terms of size of the great spotted, and the lesser spotted is now quite rare. It's more similar to a Downy in size. But we used to put up a peanut feeder in our backyard, and once in a while, a great spotted woodpecker would come down to this feeder. And they were very exciting because they were much more colorful and larger than the other birds. And so as a child, I would get excited every time the woodpecker came down. And my dad had an astronomical telescope, a big sort of 6-inch mirror telescope. And I didn't have any optics really, but I discovered that if I got as far back as I possibly could in my living room and focused that astronomical telescope on the peanut feeder, I could actually get it in focus. I almost had to put my head back against the glass of the window to get the angle. And I'd look down this thing, and the peanuts looked like the size of asteroids, you know. And eventually the woodpecker would land on the feeder, and you know the rictal bristles on the woodpecker is one of the features of their morphology, and you could really see these rictal bristles on the great spotted woodpecker. And so I just became sort of fascinated like that, and it sort of picked up from there. It's sort of a long story, but I kind of ended up taking it about as far as, probably not quite as far as some of these you know, annual world listers, but as far as I could take it.
So you both referenced birds that you had experiences with in your home area. So the next question is, where is your place for birds? Maybe it's your favorite place to see birds. Maybe it's somewhere that you've traveled to, but where is your place for birds? Jane, why don't you start?
Well, I live in Nova Scotia now, and my mother's family is from Nova Scotia way back, a couple of 100 years back. And I love Nova Scotia, and this would be my place for birds. It's my backyard, which is coastal. And right now there's a lot of winter birds coming in. Just a couple of days ago, we had horned larks coming in, and I expect the snow buntings to be coming in on the beaches. And in the water, lots of extraordinary ducks, the winter ducks. I think buffleheads are my absolute favorite, along with the harlequin ducks. So they're coming in. The eider are here year round, and there's a lot of other winter ducks here.
I'd love to see those big rafts of the ducks on the ocean. Mike, where is your place for birds?
Boy, that's such a difficult question, because there are so many really great places. And of course, you know, I think of places close to home, but I also think about places that ABC has played a role in saving that I am particularly fond of. And probably if I had to pick one place that I have become very connected to, it would be Abra Patricia in Peru. When we first went to Abra Patricia, there was no protection, no conservation going on there. The habitat was being cleared for pastures, and there were cattle starting to enter in the sides of the forest. And thanks to a grant from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, we were able to work with our Peruvian partner ECOAN and buy a significant portion of the land. And it's right next to a large protected area, the Alto Mayo, but right at the very top of the hill, the top of the mountain was unprotected. So we were able to slowly but surely acquire most of the habitat around the top of this mountain at Abra Patricia. And ECOAN built a lodge there, and then, you know, expanded that. There's a research facility now and trails. And I've been there quite a number of times during the early days, and then as we're building the lodge and other things. And I just love the place. It's just beautiful forest. It's cloud forest. It's fantastic birding, and it's a kind of it's not a very, very long trek to get there, but it's long enough that by the time you get to the restaurant and put your bags down and you're at sort of 7,000 or 8,000 feet, you really feel like, phew, I'm here, you know. And it's sort of a feeling of, for me at least, because I've been there several times, coming home and be able to sit down in the restaurant and see what's been seen. And there are hummingbird feeders right outside. And when we first went there, the hummingbirds hadn't really discovered the feeders. Last time I was there, the sword-billed hummingbirds were coming into the feeders. And sword-billed hummingbirds have quite a distinctive call note, and they're quite big. And of course, they've got this long, amazing bill. And so if you wait long enough, the sword-bills will come in. It sort of reminds me of when I was a kid looking for these great spotted woodpeckers excitedly at the feeder, waiting for this exciting bird to come in, and this sword-bill comes in eventually. And so that's one of my favorite places. And I think because of ABC's involvement there, and there's been a lot of other donors have helped us with that particular reserve. But the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation really got things started. And Adrian Forsyth helped us a lot with that. So kudos to ECOAN to pull that really wonderful project off. But of all the places, I think that's the one that's kind of close to my heart, just because of how beautiful it is.
And, you know, I don't know if you know that I went there before the lodge was built with your predecessor, George Fenwick, and also Tina Wakau of ECOAN, and a few other people. And it was absolutely extraordinary. And then ABC had other sites that they have lodges in now as well that we visited. And my gosh, how about the marvelous spatule-tailed hummingbird? Speaking of hummingbirds, in this tiny little area that ABC helped preserve down there in Peru. Those places are indelible in my mind, and that particular trip is indelible too, for just as you say, Patricia and a number of other sites that ABC has helped protect there.
Seeing those spatule tails, of course, is one of the absolute birding experiences. They're just so unbelievably amazing.
And the stunning thing about it is the habitat that it's in is really small and restricted, and brushy agricultural stuff all around. And it's just so unlike, you don't expect the spatule tail, which is so exotic, to be in this kind of ordinary brush.
So, I mean, that just speaks to the fact that, you know, when it comes to favorite places for birds, in order to protect birds properly, we've got to protect all kinds of places. And, you know, we want to protect a place close to home and to our hearts. But a lot of our birds from North America, including the wood thrush, travel long distances to Central and South America. And we need to save a place for them there as well as here. Probably part of the 3 billion bird loss that we're seeing also is related to wintering habitat. So that's a big part of saving a place for birds. For us means saving a place all along their migratory routes from their breeding areas to their wintering areas. And we can all do our bit. We can do a bit at home, but also through ABC, you can do a little bit also to help the birds when they're not at home, at your home at least.
That's right. And they're at somebody else's home, and ABC does a great job as well, teaching the people around there, if they didn't know that they had a marvelous spatule tail in their backyard, they sure find out with some education, and then they have such pride in having it in their place that they take care of it, which is the way it should be anyway. I mean, people who live in their backyards, we all should be taking care of our own backyard birds, but sometimes you just need to be shown that this is what's here.
So speaking of conservation and that habitat loss, I want to ask, what is your biggest concern that you have for birds today? And Mike, maybe you want to expand on what you said, or maybe you have something else, but why don't you start?
Well, you know, for ABC, it's all about habitat. You know, at some level, everything boils down to habitat, and the threats that birds face are applied in the habitat. Things like pesticides and feral cats and all the various collisions, they happen to birds where they're located. And even, you know, the air is habitat for birds. So things like wind turbines, things like oil and gas extraction from sage grouse areas. These things don't necessarily always kill birds outright, although sometimes they can, but they can drive birds out of their habitat. And in general, we've seen over the last 50 years, with the loss of 3 billion birds, slow degradation of bird habitats. You know, we can't really put things back the way they were. You know, times have moved on. So what we really need to do is figure out how to deliver conservation in today's world. What can we actually still do to protect what needs to be protected and manage the rest as best we can? And there's a lot that can be done to manage bird habitats that isn't just putting a fence around it and saying, don't go there. In fact, throughout most of North America, you know, a lot of the places that birds need are inactively managed landscapes. So I think from our point of view, it's really a focus on habitat, but having a broader view of what habitat conservation means is the most critical response to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, here I'm dealing with rising seas really rapidly. A lot of coastal areas, particularly when you've got the Labrador Current and the Greenland melting, and Nova Scotia is getting hit with a lot of high water all the time now. So I'm a piping plover guardian among other shorebirds that want to nest around here. And there's been a lot of just washout of their nests every time there are storms now. And they are finding some inland areas to try to make their nests now. But they need more help, and they really need us to be guarding them a lot. And I think this is true of a lot of habitats now that are under duress in one way or another. I was happy to hear that some tern colonies that are getting washed out or loss of habitat coastally on the east of North America are accepting platforms that we're building now, actually physical platforms that are on the water on stilts, or they're even floating. And the tern colonies are actually having some success on these. So there's a lot that we can do physically, as you say, to actively involve and adapt the habitats so that they can survive and thrive.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I was growing up back in England. We used to have platforms for common terns that they were using quite regularly at one location that we used to go birding at. So yeah, I think that it's all about figuring out how to do conservation in a changing world, and that world is changing for a variety of reasons. Climate change is one of the critical ones. We need to protect birds the best we can from climate change, but nature-based solutions to climate change actually can be a win-win for both birds and climate. And I'm pleased to see the recent commitments to avoid deforestation by 2030. ABC is very involved in things to do with forest conservation, both in the United States and in Latin America, and reforestation as well. We've planted literally millions of trees. We've protected around 1 million acres of land in Latin America, and we're managing millions more through our joint venture network in the United States with federal and private partners and with states. So there's a lot to be done, but I think that what we do for biodiversity conservation and birds, to protect forests, to protect wild places, is going to be critical. It's not the only thing, but it's a critical piece of our response to climate change. And we have to mitigate and adapt for birds, but just the act of conserving those wild places and forests is going to be a benefit when it comes to climate change and reducing deforestation. So I think we can make a contribution there. There's much more that needs to be done. Renewables are very important, weaning ourselves off fossil fuels. But forest conservation is going to be critical, and that is one major area where we can make a contribution, I believe, to both saving birds now and also for the future.
Yes, totally agree. Looking for carbon sinks all the time. I'm working a lot here in Canada on the boreal forest and peat bogs and things like that, because they're incredible carbon sinks. And a lot of breeding birds need to be protected here. And we're helping to give the Indigenous people, First Nations people who own a lot of the lands here in Canada, the opportunity of something that they already do to get paid for being guardians of the land. And all of this, we have to engage everybody in the world. I call us earth warriors. We have to be earth warriors to give Mother Earth the help she needs in this battle to heal. And each one of us has a role to play.
I'd like for both of you to share a place that you think everyone should go. And I know that that might be challenging just because we were talking about different access issues and travel and things like that. But maybe there's a habitat that you'd like to share, or a special place that, if everyone could teleport, that you'd like them to go. So what's a place that you wish you could take everyone to go birding? Mike, why don't you start?
Well, there's lots of them. I mean, I wish I could take everybody to Abra Patricia, but it's not always practical to get to the Andes of Peru. I hope people will think about that, because it is really stunning. One of my favorite places close to home is Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge. I love that refuge, and it's got so many different habitats. It's got some large pools. It's got one of the best shorebird pools in Raymond's Pool that I know of in the East. And the avocets that you can see there are always a crowd pleaser. And we had roseate spoonbills coming up last summer. You can see barred owl, eastern screech owl, barn owl, and great horned owl. You can get 4 owl species there. The clapper rails are always charging around. There's northern harriers out there. Caspian terns flying over, various different things. Blue grosbeaks everywhere. It's just a fun place to go birding. There are many others, but probably if you come over to visit me, we're going to be going to Bombay Hook at some point.
Right. Well, oh gosh, I love the Northeast in spring migration. I do love New England, New York area, and I would do that for spring migration. That's probably because I've been going out and to count birds for breeding birds early, not early, but in May. And however, there's a couple of other places that I think are pretty incredible. They're well known. McGee Marsh in Ohio is a stunning place to go with boardwalks. And the one thing that I talk about that is in the United States that not enough people know about really is one of the greatest migrations on Earth. And that is in Nebraska. You fly into Kearney for the Platte River crane migration. These are the sandhill cranes that come in by the 100,000s to nest on the Platte River on their migration north. And it is one of the great sights in the world. I've been there several times, and I would encourage anybody to just hop on a plane to Kearney in March and see this incredible migration of cranes.
You have to bundle up if you go then, right?
Yes, it can be a little chilly, or especially you have to get up early in the morning and the cranes take off, and it's just worth it. The sound, they have beautiful blinds there for you to stand in. And so that is one of my favorite. Now, for me personally, a place that I love the northern climes. Clearly, I'm kind of although I love the tropics, and I've spent quite a lot of time when I was younger in the tropics with ABC and other groups. And but right now, I'm crazy about the huge colonies of seabirds like northern gannets in Newfoundland. There's a great colony of northern gannets that numbers about 25,000 breeding birds on a couple of rocks, stacks 400 feet high in the ocean. And of course, they're over in Europe as well, in the UK. But there's kittiwakes there, and common murres and thick-billed murres and all kinds of things. And I'm very, very attracted to these kind of things. So Newfoundland, it would be another place that I'd go, because you can go not only to Cape St. Mary's and just sit there literally 10 feet from these breeding gannets, or you can go to Witless Bay and see a colony of 200,000 puffins. So, and whales. So I think that Newfoundland is a great trip too.
Yeah, I have an affinity to the north as well for some reason. I'm not really sure where it comes from, but
You were born in the UK.
Probably that's where it started, I guess. But you know, I think growing up there were certain birds from the Arctic which were they were kind of iconic, and gyrfalcon is one of them. But there are a number of others, things like snowy owls, ivory gulls, all of these sort of very rare birds for the place I grew up, and I've always had a fascination hoping to see those. So I love the far north as well. I went to Alaska in June, and that was an amazing place. And of course, it's another place that's being affected by climate change more than probably some of the other areas. There are, you know, from the point of view of having hope, there are still large numbers of birds, and it is a state that still has huge amounts of wilderness. So it's very exciting from the point of view of conservation to see that there is still a lot of habitat there. And there is still a lot of habitat in many, many places. There's still a lot of habitat in the Andes. There's still a lot of habitat in the Northern Great Plains for grassland birds. We've still got hundreds of thousands of these birds. Even though we've lost a lot, there's still hope. And I think that just reflecting on some of these places and the vast crane migration, we still have a lot of these things now. There's still time to make sure that they stay around to the future. We haven't run out of time, but we do need to get going. We can't be complacent. Now's the time to make sure we hang on to these things for the future. But there are these just wonderful places still out there. And ABC is working a lot of them. There are other partners also working a lot of these places, and we work with most of the other big bird conservation groups. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it's going to take a community to raise our birds back to where they should be.
Yes, and I'm pleased that you brought up partnership, because it is the only way to proceed right now, when we all have to be all hands on board, all earth warriors, as I say. And partnership is the most important thing. And what I love and people are going to learn more and more about is the new technologies that are allowing us to know where birds go. And we're all in partnership, all the birding organizations and people that are working on these tech things are in partnership to make sure that the birds are going to be tracked properly, and that we're going to know that where they're going, and then we will be able to save them more readily. For example, we didn't know until recently that the Central Valley of California was taking 40 million birds in 1 week during the migration from the north down to the south recently. So, this is the kind of thing we're learning, which is going to help us, each one of us, protect these birds.
Yeah, it is interesting how much we're still learning about familiar birds. And, for example, the staging areas of whimbrels on the East Coast in spring migration, we didn't know that sort of 20 or 30,000 whimbrels were staging on one island in South Carolina until just recently.
Yeah.
So there's so many secrets still to uncover. And as we continue to learn, we can adapt our conservation. We have to do both. We have to get going now and also continue to study these things. And we see that we need to work together. I mean, this is one of those times where you have to pull all hands on deck and make sure that everybody is communicating well. We're actually working as an expanded team. And I think that bird conservation now has gotten to a really good point. Everybody is working very, very well together. And that's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to take. But I'm very heartened to see that. I'm heartened to see the partnerships. I'm heartened to see that we still have birds out there. I know that we've lost large numbers of birds. There are birds close to extinction, but we do have the infrastructure now. We have the partnerships to do this. What we really need is money. That's the secret sauce to make this all work. And we know how to get conservation done. We know how to manage habitats for birds. We know how to protect places. We know how to be inclusive in those projects. But it's a question of scaling it up. We need to scale up what we're doing to meet the challenge that we all know is out there. So that's the next step for us.
Yes, and that's, when I'm speaking to the public about how they can help, not only take care of the birds in your own backyard, put in a pollinator garden, or I put in one this year. I couldn't believe how easy it was. And then suddenly I had all these hummingbirds and I had all these butterflies. It was extraordinary. We can do that. And we can also, what I like to say is support a local organization, support a regional one, and support a global one, or a hemispheric one. And to the extent that you can, because those are where the scientists and the experts and the on the ground people are, and the communities that we want to protect. And I would also, I'd also just like to say that ABC is, well, it was the first birding organization that I was asked to be a part of it back in the beginning, the first board back in the 90s. And I was so thrilled then with what ABC was doing, because I call ABC the strategic one. The strategic one. It does all the science. It knows just where it needs to go to protect, as we were talking about, the marvelous spatule-tailed hummingbird, or an owl, or any bird's habitat that is threatened. And you know exactly what to do. And it's very exciting because you get results, great results. Every single organization has its own kind of methods and its way. But the fact is what you say, Mike, everybody's working together now, so that when you support ABC, you are also supporting a larger thrust towards the global preservation of birds.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. We do focus on getting results, and we focus on making sure that we have our Charity Navigator high ratings, our Guide Star rating for program effectiveness, all of those things, which are so important. I know that contributors look to those. ABC, is always doing well in those ratings because we do focus on results, but we also focus on the means to the ends as well. And having fair means is very, very important to us. Getting conservation results that doesn't include people would not be something that ABC would be involved in. And so the means to the ends are really important. And we try and balance the results and the means to those ends together. But results and making sure that donations do result in bird conservation has always been the core of our strategy. And I appreciate you saying that we're strategic, because I feel like ABC is really focused on the strategy of preventing bird extinctions, conserving habitat for declining birds, and countering threats to birds while building the capacity and including people and the communities needed to get those other three tasks done: preventing extinctions, stopping birds from declining, and addressing threats. Those are the results that we aim for. And I think,
if I might add, you also give the public solutions, ways we can be involved. This is, I mean, you have the best campaign about how to prevent collisions with windows for us in our own homes, what we can do. If you'll notice, my windows here, they all have the panels, so the bird doesn't find a big panel of glass. It's all broken up. So what ABC does this beautifully, and you give us solutions.
Yeah, we do focus on technological solutions where they're possible, and the glass program is an excellent one. Chris Shepard is probably the global expert on this topic, and it has been on ABC staff for a while and has done a tremendous job in figuring out different window treatments. And architects aren't always looking for one solution, and so Chris has developed a variety of different approaches to dealing with window glass and the design of buildings that can safeguard birds, but also be beautiful buildings, and you can still see out of your window. Don't worry about that. As you know, there are ways to make sure that birds can see them and we can't. For example, with the use of ultraviolet patterns embedded in the glass. One of the glass products we've been working with, Ornilux, does that and can be installed. And there's a great place in Chicago at the Botanical Garden there where they have installed the Ornilux, and I visited it, and you really don't notice it until you look right up, and you sort of have to get the angle right to see there's a pattern there, but the birds will see it because their UV range, at least for most species, is broader than ours, and so they'll see a pattern, whereas we won't.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So we've talked about some really heavy and serious topics so far. We've talked about habitat loss and preventing extinctions, not just helping birds, but preventing extinctions. But the thing that's come through in both of your answers and comments so far is the sense of joy and hope that birds bring and the solutions that are out there. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure I asked both of you is about that inspiration that birds bring to you, your career. I know both of you are artists, whether it's music or acting or photography. So maybe you both can just share a few more comments about, again, that inspiration and just joy that birds bring to your life. So Mike, why don't you start?
Growing up in the 1980s in Britain, it was rather a bleak period in history of the country. There's a lot of unemployment. Teenagers like myself didn't necessarily have a lot of hope that we would find, something great to do with our lives. And somehow I just came across birds and it just lit me up. I just got so excited about birding, and I just decided to dedicate myself to seeing birds. And it was just a pathway out of a rather gloomy existence at the time. So it really, it changed my life. I mean, I don't know what would have happened to me if it hadn't been for birds. And, maybe I'd have found another path, but fortunately I found this incredibly exciting path that just brings a new dimension of color and interest to the world. And there's a connection that I think you feel to nature when you can understand it better. And there's something very fundamental about being connected to nature. And I love art and I love the human world, but there's something that just hits you right in the DNA when you actually connect to nature and you feel like you can exist and participate in the natural world as well. And birds are like a kind of roadmap to the globe, if you like. And if you follow birds, I think you'll find that they'll take you to the most amazing places. You'll learn all kinds of things about culture and people along the way. And it's just brings an extra like stardust to life. There's always that little extra thing that you're driving along and, a turkey vulture swoops down and banks around and you watch that turkey vulture and you think, how is it turning around? Because, you don't really see what they're doing. They can just go round in a circle. And it's like, what did it do? It did something with its primaries, but I couldn't see it. And it's spinning round. And just that kind of stuff is so fun for me. So I just think the birds just bring a new extra dimension to life. And so does art and music and all those great things. But the connection to nature for me is a more fundamental one. And I've just always found it to be very, enjoyable, and really was a spark that made my life much better than it would have been otherwise.
Lovely. Well, I certainly appreciate and resonate with everything that you've already said. And it's joy. For me as a child, what I loved about birds was they could fly. They could fly. And so I look at them now as, well, historically, all kind of writers and people have seen them as messengers from God, messengers from angels, messengers bringing us things. And indeed they are messengers, because they are landscape, seascape, airscape species. They're the only ones, and some of them are global, make the most astonishing migratory flights of 30,000 miles, or the little blackpoll warbler, 15,000 miles, And so for me, they always had mystery and beauty, and they were everywhere. Even when you go up to the farthest Arctic, there's not a lot of species up there, or Antarctica, except penguins. But there's always birds everywhere. So I think the message that they're telling me right now and us is, save us and you save the world. Take care of us and everything else will be taken care of. Think about it. Mm-hmm. We make the air clean, we make the land soil clean, we make the oceans non-acidic and so on. The birds will be there and we'll be healthier and everything will be healthy. I love them. I never ever tire of them during this whole COVID year, when I've been a lot in isolation, as we all have been in one way or another. It is birds that have brought me out of it every single time. I go out every single day, rain, shine, snow, sleet, and I will find at least one bird. I found a robin. A robin was on the pond in a sleet storm, standing on the ice and looking for worms that had been in the little bits of water on the top to eat. So they're just astonishing. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I often think that humans have got one really terrible design flaw, which is we are so intolerant to temperature changes, yet birds can seemingly deal with anything. And of course they have feathers, which helps them out a lot. Yeah. But still, even when I put on like the biggest down jacket and I'm freezing and the harlequin ducks are flying around and they're washing themselves in the water and they just look perfectly happy, and I'm just sort of shivering there. Amazing creatures, just they can fly. But I like your that idea of saving the world through birds, and I often thought that might be a good motto for ABC, because that's sort of what we do. Birds are the canary in the coal mine for the places that we love to go for nature. And if we can protect birds, exactly as you say, Jane, we can save the world through birds. All those places that are important to birds are important to all those other species as well. But we know more about birds. They're widely distributed. The science points us in the direction. So I completely agree. I think that's absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
Our time is quickly coming to a close. Thank you so much, Jane and Mike. As we all know, wild birds and their habitats face incredible challenges each and every day. This Giving Tuesday, we're asking our supporters to save a place for birds in your heart by making a gift to ABC. So please consider going to saveaplaceforbirds.org before midnight and giving a generous gift to birds. But before we end officially, I'm going to ask both of you one last question. Okay. What is one thing that you hope people take away from this conversation and share with a friend?
Well, why don't I start? Mike can finish up. as the leader of ABC. And you're a wonderful leader, Mike, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
The one thing that I hope people will take away from this conversation is that there's a lot of joy in birds, and you can still find them in the world, and we can do this. We can do this regarding loss of habitat and climate change. It's not rocket science. It's a little bit more complex than rocket science, but think of how far rocket science has come. So we can do this together. Find solutions. We're doing it every single day, and people are doing it in little places. And if each one of us just spends a little time on our own backyards, as I say, giving to the organizations that have the scientists and the people on the ground doing the hard slog work of saving and protecting birds and the land and the people that live there, we can do it. So we shouldn't feel despair.
Yeah, I would agree with Jane. I just think do something positive. You know, hand wringing isn't going to get birds saved, and there's a lot to worry about for sure, but we need to go step by step, and we will get this done if we take it one step at a time, do the things that we know that work, and then scale them up. Mm-hmm. And that's what ABC has been doing. It's what some of our partners are doing. And I would just say, you know, please take some action to help with birds. If it's something at your own home, that's great. We would love it if you could help ABC as well on Giving Tuesday. That would be wonderful. But yeah, do something positive. And we can make a difference. We are making a difference. And there's still great places and birds out there. We're working to make sure they stay there. And we appreciate your help.
Wonderful. Both incredible answers. So what a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much again, Jane and Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you again to all of the supporters of ABC. We can't appreciate you enough. So cheers to the birds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Jane. And yeah, thank you everybody for supporting ABC and bird conservation. We do really, really appreciate it.
Hear, hear.
Thanks.